There's a moment every boy knows. You just did something. Maybe you scored the winning goal in the last 30 seconds of the game. Maybe you got the highest grade in the class and the teacher said your name in front of everyone. Maybe you built something with your hands, something that actually worked, that actually stood, and you wanted someone to see it before the moment could disappear. And before the feeling had a chance to settle, before the sound had even died down, you turned around, not toward the crowd, not toward your teammates or your friends or anyone who was already celebrating with you. You turned toward one person, and in that person's face, you were searching for something so specific, so exact, that there isn't really a word for it in any other context. Not approval, not praise, not even love. Exactly, though love is part of it. You were looking for pride, the kind that changes someone's face when they see you, the kind that makes the eyes go a little softer and a little brighter at the same time, the kind that says, without needing to say it out loud, I see what you just did. I understand what it cost you, and I am proud of you. Not good job, not a nod, not the half attention of someone who is watching from far away and isn't quite sure what just happened, but knows they're supposed to react. Something real, something that would have stayed with you. Some boys find it. They turn around and it's right there, exactly where they hoped it would be, and something in them settles. Deeply, permanently, in a way that most people never even notice because they're already busy feeling the next thing. And some boys spend the rest of their lives turning around, wondering if this time will be different. If this achievement, this one, the biggest one yet, will finally be the one that earns it. This is for the second kind. The first time it really happened, you probably can't name the exact day. Memory doesn't always work like that. But you remember the feeling. You remember the quality of the light, maybe, the way the air felt, the fact that your heart was doing something unusual and you didn't fully understand why. You were young, maybe 7, maybe 9, old enough to understand that what you'd done was genuinely good, old enough to be aware that other people had noticed, but young enough to still believe, truly believe, without a shadow of doubt, that good things get seen by the people who matter most. Maybe it was a school play. You had the biggest part, or one of the biggest, and you'd practiced your lines until they stopped being words and started being something you just knew, the way you know how to walk or breathe. And you stood up there under the lights with your heart hammering, and you didn't forget a single word. Not one. Maybe it was a race. You crossed the finish line first, and your lungs were burning, and your legs felt like they were made of something different than they usually were. And it felt, just for a second, like flying. Maybe it was smaller than that. Maybe you fixed something around the house that had been broken for weeks, something the adults kept walking past, and you figured it out yourself and quietly set it right. Or maybe you just made your mother laugh in a way she hadn't laughed in a long time. That kind of laugh that surprises her, that she can't hold back. Whatever it was, you looked for him. You ran over. Or you looked up from across the room. Or you held the thing out, the trophy, the drawing, the report card with the number circled in red. And you held your breath without knowing you were holding it. And he looked at the thing. And then he looked at you. And there was a moment, just a fraction of a second, where everything was still possible. Where the words could still come. And then they didn't. Maybe he said something practical. Don't let it go to your head. Maybe he pointed out the one thing that could have been done better. Maybe he said good in that tone of voice that means I acknowledge this happened, but nothing more. Maybe his eyes moved, just slightly, to something else in the room while you were still standing there. Or maybe, and this is the version that the most people carry, he just didn't react the way you needed him to. Not badly. Not with cruelty. Just with a kind of quiet insufficiency that you didn't have words for yet. Like watching a door stay closed when you were sure it was about to open. And you went back outside. But something had happened that you couldn't undo. You had learned something, without anyone teaching it, without any ceremony, about the distance between what you do and what gets truly seen. And quietly, without making a decision about it, you started keeping score. Not of your victories, of his reactions. And you started building toward a response that hadn't come yet. If you've ever wondered why you push as hard as you do, why enough never quite feels like enough, stay with me. Because what happened next explains more about the man you became than almost anything else. Then came the fall. And I don't mean a stumble. I don't mean a small mistake you could put in your pocket and walk away from before anyone noticed. I mean the real kind. The kind where something you'd worked toward, something you'd built in your mind and invested in and quietly told yourself was coming, collapsed. The kind where the failure was visible, where people knew. Maybe you failed an exam you'd studied for harder than you'd ever studied for anything. Maybe you lost a competition that mattered to you more than you'd admitted out loud, because admitting how much you wanted something always felt like giving someone permission to watch you not get it. Maybe you made a choice, the wrong one, in a moment where the pressure was too high and you were too young and the cost turned out to be bigger than anything you'd planned for. You were old enough by then to feel shame without anyone explaining it to you. Old enough to run the replay in your head and identify exactly where it went wrong. Old enough to understand that this failure was, in some specific and uncomfortable way, yours. And yet, even through the embarrassment, even through the quiet fury at yourself, even in the moment when you were still trying to figure out how bad it actually was, there was that reflex again. You looked for him. And I want to be clear about what you were looking for. Because it wasn't rescue. You weren't looking to be saved or told it hadn't happened, that it wasn't as bad as it seemed. You were past the age for that kind of comfort. What you were looking for was harder to name and harder to ask for. You were looking for someone who had been where you were, who had failed, truly failed, not just missed but fallen, and who was still standing. Someone to say, without flinching, I know this feeling. I've had it too. And you need to hear me say this. It doesn't end here. You are not this moment. That was all. 3 sentences. Maybe 4. Instead, maybe he was quiet in a way that had weight to it. Maybe he walked you through everything you should have done differently, step by step, methodically, as if the lesson mattered more than the person receiving it. Maybe he mentioned someone else, a cousin, a classmate, a kid from the neighborhood, who hadn't fallen. And he let that comparison sit there between you without ever picking it back up. Or maybe, and this is the version that cuts the deepest, the one people carry for decades without fully understanding why, he said nothing at all. Just looked at you. Not with cruelty. Not even with clear disappointment. Just with a kind of measuring silence that told you everything about where you now stood. And you received that silence like a verdict. Not a temporary one. Not something you could appeal. A permanent one. A verdict about your value when the performance stopped. That was the day something rearranged itself inside you. Not dramatically, no breaking point, no declared moment of change. Just a quiet shift. A door that closed without slamming. You stopped expecting warmth after failure. You started expecting evaluation. And slowly, without anyone telling you to, without even fully realizing it was happening, you started to evaluate yourself the same way. Not as someone who fell and got up and kept going, but as someone who had to earn their way back. Over and over. Who had to prove, again and again, that the fall was an exception and not a definition. You didn't know what you were carrying. You just knew you were tired in a way that sleep didn't fix. And the man you became, his drive, his restlessness, his ability to push through things that would stop other people cold, was built, in no small part, around that rearrangement. Built around a boy who fell, who turned around, and found nothing to hold on to. But here's what I haven't told you yet. And this is the part that changes everything. And so the chase began. Not the kind of chase you see in movies. No one was running. No one was being chased across a field or down a street. This was quieter than that. Slower. The kind of chase that happens entirely inside, and the finish line keeps moving. You probably didn't even call it a chase at the time. You called it ambition. You called it drive. You called it being the kind of person who doesn't settle. And those things were true. They were genuinely true. You did have ambition. You did have drive. You were the kind of person who didn't settle. But underneath those words, underneath the resume and the accomplishments and the framed certificates on the wall, there was a quieter engine running. One you never named out loud. One you might not have even known was there. You were still trying to earn it. Not consciously. Not in the sense of waking up every morning and thinking, today I will do something that finally makes him say the words. It wasn't that deliberate. It was woven into the fabric of your choices in a way that felt like instinct. Like personality. Like who you simply were. The promotion you went after when everyone else was content to stay where they were. The extra hours you put in when no one was watching and no one would know if you'd stopped 2 hours earlier. The way you prepared for things, presentations, conversations, decisions, with a thoroughness that bordered on obsessive, because the thought of being caught unprepared felt like a physical threat. Not embarrassment. Something deeper than embarrassment. Something closer to exposure. All of it. Every late night. Every early morning. Every moment you pushed past what was reasonable was a letter you were writing without ink. A letter addressed to a man who didn't know he was waiting for one. And the logic was simple, even if you never stated it plainly. If the small things didn't get his attention, maybe the big things will. If the school play didn't do it, maybe the degree will. If the degree didn't do it, maybe the career will. If the career didn't do it, maybe the title will. The salary, the house, the life that looks, from the outside, like someone who got everything right. You were climbing a ladder you didn't build, toward a platform you couldn't see, expecting to find something at the top that had never been promised to you. And the strangest part, the part that will feel familiar to anyone who's lived this, is that none of this felt strange at the time. It just felt like being a man, like being an adult, like being responsible and driven and focused, and all the other words people use to describe someone who's quietly running himself into the ground for a reason he can't articulate. But every now and then, maybe late at night, maybe in the car after a long day, maybe standing in the shower when the water was hot enough to blur the edges of everything, you'd catch yourself wondering, not in full sentences, not in anything you could write down, just a feeling, a question that didn't have words. Is this it? Is this what I've been running toward? And you'd push the question aside because there was another deadline, another goal, another thing to achieve. The next thing. Always the next thing. Because the next thing might be the one. The next thing might finally be big enough. This is the part of the story where I need to say something directly. If you're still watching, if you've made it this far, it's because some part of you recognizes this. Maybe not all of it. Maybe your story has different details. But the shape of it, the outline, is the same. And I want you to know, I'm not telling this to make you feel sorry for the boy you were. I'm telling it because the next 2 moments change everything. And if you don't understand what came before them, you won't understand why they matter as much as they do. 2 moments. 2 days. One that was supposed to be the happiest of your life. And one that was the hardest. The first was your wedding day. You were standing there, at the altar, or at the front of the room, or wherever it happened for you. And you were watching someone walk toward you who had chosen you. Chosen you. Not your achievements. Not your resume. Not the version of you that performed and performed and performed until there was nothing left. They had chosen the person underneath all of that. The one even you sometimes forgot existed. And for a few hours, maybe for the only time in your adult life, the chase stopped. You weren't thinking about the next thing. You weren't calculating what this day would prove or what it would earn. You were just there. Present. Happy in a way that felt almost foreign because it didn't require you to do anything except receive it. And then came the speeches, the toasts, the clinking of glasses, the room full of people who loved you, or at least liked you enough to show up. And one by one, they stood and said things. Beautiful things. Funny things. Things that made the room laugh and things that made it quiet. And then it was his turn. He stood up. He cleared his throat. And for one suspended moment, one impossible, fragile moment, you felt it again. That old reflex. That old turn. Even now. Even after everything. Even after decades of evidence to the contrary. Some part of you still believed. Still hoped. Still waited. He spoke. And what he said was fine. It was appropriate. It was the kind of speech that gets polite applause and no one remembers 10 minutes later. He talked about the weather. He talked about the venue. He might have mentioned something from your childhood, a story that was more about him than about you. And the moment passed. The words you'd been waiting for, the 4 words that had been absent from every victory and every failure and every milestone in between, didn't come. Not because he withheld them this time, but because it genuinely didn't occur to him that they needed to be said, that they'd ever needed to be said. That was its own kind of wound. Not a sharp one. Not something that made you gasp. Just a quiet confirmation of something you'd already known for years. He didn't know what you needed, and he couldn't give what he didn't know was missing. You finished the day. You smiled for the photos. You danced. You did everything a man is supposed to do on his wedding day. And if anyone noticed that your eyes kept drifting towards something no one else could see, they didn't mention it. The second moment was the funeral. Not his. Not yet. Someone else. Someone who had been part of the landscape of your life for as long as you could remember. And you were standing there in the clothes you never wanted to wear, surrounded by people speaking in the hushed tones reserved for death. And you were thinking about something that had nothing to do with the person in the casket. You were thinking about him. Because funerals have a way of doing that. They clear away the noise. They strip out everything that doesn't matter and leave only the things that do. And standing there, staring at a coffin that held someone who could no longer speak, you understood something with a clarity that felt like cold water. He was going to die someday. Not someday in the abstract. Not the someday of dinner conversations and hypothetical plans. The real someday. The one that happens on an ordinary Tuesday, or a quiet Sunday morning, or in the middle of the night when no one is prepared. The someday that doesn't wait for you to be ready. And when that day came, when they lowered him into the ground and the dirt made that sound it makes, and the people went home and the world kept turning, those 4 words would be buried with him. Not because they were refused, but because they were never spoken. Not because he didn't love you. He probably did, in whatever way he knew how. But because the words themselves had never been part of his vocabulary. And you realized, in that moment, standing in the back of a funeral home with a cup of cold coffee in your hand, that you'd been waiting your entire life for something that might simply never come. Not because you didn't deserve it. Not because you hadn't earned it 100 times over. But because the person you were waiting for didn't have it to give. That is a different kind of grief. Not the sharp kind that comes with death. The slow kind. The kind that's been accumulating for so long you don't even notice the weight anymore. The kind that has become so normal you've mistaken it for your own personality. And here's what happens next. This is the part that no one tells you. The part that most men never reach because they spend their whole lives chasing a finish line that keeps moving. You can write the letter. Not the letter you send. Not the one he reads. The one you write for yourself. Here is what the letter says. Not the exact words. Your words will be your own. But here is the shape of it. The outline. The thing that needs to be said out loud at least once, even if the only person listening is you. Dad, I've been writing this letter my whole life. In my head. In the choices I made. In the things I chased, and the things I ran from. And I don't know if you'll ever read it. I don't even know if I'll ever say it out loud in a room where you're present. But I need to say it anyway. Not for you. For me. I spent my childhood turning around. Every achievement, every milestone, every moment that meant something, I turned around to find you. And every time, you were either not looking, or looking at the wrong thing, or looking at me in a way that told me nothing. I don't think you did this on purpose. I don't think you woke up every morning planning to withhold something from me. I think you gave me what you had. And what you had was limited. Not because you were cruel, but because someone probably never gave it to you either. But here's what I need you to understand. And this is the part I'm only now learning to say without anger. I needed 4 words. 4. And their absence shaped me more than their presence ever could have. I built a life around trying to earn them. I turned my entire existence into an application for a job I already had. The job of being your son. And the truth is, the honest truth, the kind that's hard to say and harder to hear. I'm tired. I'm so tired of chasing something you might not even know you're holding. I'm tired of performing. I'm tired of achievements that feel empty the moment I reach them because the one person I wanted to see them never really did. I don't hate you. I don't even blame you. Not anymore. The blame was useful for a while. It gave me somewhere to put the pain. But it didn't make the pain any smaller. It just gave it an address. What I want now, what I've always wanted, isn't an apology. It isn't a retroactive rewrite of my childhood. I know that's not possible. What I want is simpler than that and harder at the same time. I want to stop turning around. I want to stop checking over my shoulder for a reaction that isn't coming. I want to be able to do something good, something genuine, and let it be good on its own terms. Not as evidence. Not as an exhibit in a lifelong trial I never agreed to. Just as a thing I did. A thing that mattered. And I want you to know, because this part matters too, that I still love you. That's the strange thing about all of this. The love never went away. It just got buried under years of silence and misdirection and the slow accumulation of small disappointments. But it's still there. It's still real. I don't know if you're capable of saying what I needed to hear. I don't know if those words exist in you. And I've decided, finally, after all these years, that I can't spend the rest of my life waiting to find out. So I'm writing this letter. Not to change you. Not to start a conversation you're not ready for. But to change me. To put the words somewhere outside my own head so I can finally stop carrying them alone. I am proud of who I became. I am proud of the man I built. The one who kept going even when the silence was deafening. I am proud of the things I did and the reasons I did them and the person I am when no one is watching. I'm proud of me. And I think I really think that's enough. It has to be. That's the letter. Not an accusation. Not a plea. Just the truth. Spoken at last. Not into his ear. Into the air. Into the page. Into whatever part of the universe handles the things we finally let go of. And here's what I want you to know, if you've come this far with me. You can write yours too. Not because it will fix everything. It won't. Not because it will change him. It might not. But because some things lose their power when they stop being secrets. And the silence you've been carrying, the weight of those unsaid words, is something you were never meant to carry alone. Here's what no one tells you about the letter. It doesn't change him. I want to be honest about that, truly honest, because too many stories end with the fantasy version. The version where the letter arrives, and he reads it, and his face changes, and the words come, and decades of silence are erased in a single afternoon. That version is beautiful. It's also a lie. Most letters like this are never sent. And most fathers who receive them don't suddenly become different people. They don't gain the vocabulary they never had. They don't develop the emotional fluency that was absent their entire lives. The letter doesn't rewrite their history or unlock a tenderness they buried somewhere. It just doesn't. And that's not the point. The point of the letter was never him. It was always you. The letter is a ceremony. A private one. A ritual of release that no one watches and no one applauds and no one will ever know about except you. But it works. Not because the words reach him, but because they leave you. For 30 years, 40 years, maybe longer, those words have been living inside you like tenants who never paid rent. They've been taking up space. They've been shaping your decisions, your relationships, your sense of what you're worth and what you're allowed to want. They've been speaking in the background of every achievement and every failure, whispering the same question over and over. Is this finally enough? And when you finally write them down, when you finally give them a form outside your own body, something shifts. Not dramatically, not in a way that makes you want to call someone and announce it, but it shifts. The words stop being a weight and start being an artifact, something you can look at, something you can hold, something you can fold up and put in a drawer and then walk away from. You don't need to send it for it to be real. You just need to write it. I know that sounds too simple. I know it sounds like the kind of advice that belongs on a mug or a social media post. But the reason it sounds simple is because it is simple. It's just not easy. Simple and easy are not the same thing. What's easy is staying in the chase. What's easy is keeping the words inside and letting them shape you from the shadows. What's easy is telling yourself you're fine. You've moved past it. You don't need it, while your choices keep proving otherwise. What's hard is sitting down with a blank page and letting 30 years of silence come out of you. But here's what happens after. Slowly, quietly, in ways you won't notice for months or years. You stop performing. Not all at once. Not in every area of your life. But the performance starts to lose its grip. You start doing things because you want to do them, not because they might finally earn what you've been chasing. You start making choices based on whether they feel true, not whether they look impressive from a distance. You stop turning around. The reflex doesn't disappear overnight. It's been there too long, been reinforced too many times. But it gets weaker. The pause after an achievement, the moment when you'd normally glance over your shoulder, gets shorter. And eventually, one day, it doesn't come at all. You do something good, something that matters to you, and you just let it be good. You don't need anyone to validate it. You don't need a witness. You don't need 4 words from a man who was never going to say them. You just need to know, in your own bones, that it was enough. That you are enough. That is freedom. Not the loud kind. Not the kind with flags and declarations. The quiet kind. The kind where you're driving home from work on an ordinary Tuesday and you realize, without having planned to realize anything, that you feel lighter. That something you were carrying is no longer in your hands. And you can't even pinpoint when you put it down. If you're the son in this story, and I know many of you are, here is what I want you to take from this. The silence you grew up with was never about your worth. It was about his limitation, his inability, his own unfinished story. You were trying to fill a cup that had a hole in the bottom. That was never your job. It was never your failure. It was just the shape of the situation you were born into. And if you're the father now, the one raising sons and daughters of your own, here is what I want you to take. Say the words. Even if it feels awkward. Even if you didn't grow up hearing them yourself. Even if you're not sure you're saying them right. Say them anyway. Tell your son you're proud of him. Not just when he wins. When he loses. When he tries and falls short. When he shows up and does the hard thing that no one saw. Tell him in the car after the game he didn't win. Tell him at the dinner table when he admits something he's ashamed of. Tell him on the phone, late at night, when he calls you because he doesn't know who else to call. Say it until it becomes ordinary. Say it until he never has to wonder. Say it until the words are so woven into the fabric of his life that he can't imagine a version of himself without them. Because the words you say become the voice he hears inside his own head for the rest of his life. Make sure it's a kind voice. Make sure it's a proud one. And if no one ever said those words to you, if you are still waiting, still turning around, still holding a letter you never wrote, consider this your invitation. Write it. Not for him. For you. Because the boy who was never told, the one who learned to read silence and call it love, the one who built a life on the foundation of an absence, the one who is still, somewhere inside you, standing on a field or a stage or a doorstep waiting for a reaction that never came. That boy deserves to hear the words at last, even if the only person speaking them is you. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of the man you became. I'm proud of the way you kept going when the silence was all you had. And that's not a letter you need to send. It's a letter you just need to believe.